Federico, it's a pleasure to have you as my guest. Welcome to the J Curve.
Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to be here.
You are not Brazilian. It's
No.
actually funny enough, but that's a story of a substantial number of founders whom I know who built massive businesses in Brazil. But you come from a small town in Patagonia, and you've been working in the banking for 5 years or so. You didn't like it that much. And you decided to get back to entrepreneurship. But what do you think? Where's this entrepreneurial drive and curiosity about solving like big problems is coming from? Is that something that you inherited, or is it like, where's that from, do you think?
I think it's because I didn't like to work for a bank. I just wanted to do something that is more fun.
And why did you decide to do that something in Brazil?
Well, I didn't come to Brazil really. I went to Chile because the government of Chile had this Startup Chile thing that will give you like $40,000 to start something there for free if you stay 6 months. The objective was to create a unicorn. So we are one of the unicorns to come out of there.
Was it called Transportar Online?
Yeah.
2010, right?
Yeah. 2011, I left JP Morgan 30th of November of 2011, but I started doing my business as a side at night. So I had a flatmate that he was at Goldman as a developer. We are still in touch. Now he lives in Switzerland, Ariel. And then he will say to me, like, you have two jobs, one that pays you the money and the other one that takes the money away, because I will work overnight for a year. So I started as a 2010. It
was a marketplace for shipments as well.
Yeah, it was a marketplace,
Yeah.
but it was a different type of marketplace that I didn't understand at the time. The marketplaces need to have a lot of fragmentation, massive fragmentation from both sides of the equation, both sides of the table. And there was a marketplace for moving houses at the beginning. So I thought we are going to start with moving houses because it's easier. I'm going to start with Chile because it's the easiest country in LatAm, and bureaucracy is slow. It's easier to open a company. You can do it like in 2 days. And then after that, I'm going to go to Argentina because I speak Spanish and I'm Argentinian. And Brazil is going to be the last one because it's the largest, but it's the most difficult. And a lot of LatAm entrepreneurs that are not from Brazil do that. We are going to do everything, and Brazil is the last one. And then what happens, we had two problems with the business model. One is that Chile doesn't have any fragmentation. But then when you move houses, if you move houses, maybe you move one time in your life, and then you're not going to even remember what you used to move. So you don't have like these people coming back to the platform all the time. So you need to cover the cost of acquisition of one load has to be low enough for you to pay in with one transaction. And then the churn is going to be massive because the user is going to use you
Just once.
one time.
Yeah.
And then if I ask you which company you used to move houses, you will probably won't remember. So you don't have a word of mouth. So we said, okay, not a good idea. Let's change and let's go to the difficult part, which is B2B. We need to go and sell to Unilever, those guys. So I start looking at, again, trying to solve the problem of the excess capacity, but in the wrong way. So we look at it was another mistake. We look at what's going on in the US and we set up a broker, which, when the little guys that sell to the large corporations. So I started a broker. The marketplace didn't exist. The marketplace was the truck stops. So we started a company that will go to, say, Unilever and say, I can help you out to move your freights. And then we will try to find the trucker. And the way to find the trucker is at truck stops. The problem is that if you want to have a footprint in 100% of the country, you need like people everywhere, and it's very slow. And you're never going to really build like a massive company. The largest broker in Brazil, I think, is like 3-4 billion reais. So I was in Argentina, a guy called Santiago Bilinkis. I don't know if he remembers me. He's an Argentine entrepreneur. I had a coffee with him, asking him to invest. And then he said, at the time he was investing in a company called Restaurando. And he said, if you are serious about it, go to Brazil. What are you doing here? And then I took him very seriously. So I moved to Brazil because it's this phrase from George Paulo Leman that says, thinking small and thinking big, it takes the same effort. So I didn't speak Portuguese. I didn't have any money. But I thought I really need to move to Brazil because Brazil is 70% of Latin America in terms of trucking, because the railroad network is very limited. So this is like a massive market. And then I got to understand with time that if I won Brazil, Argentina is also won because of the amount of traffic you have between Brazil and Argentina. Like today, we loaded 250 massive trucks in Argentina. But we tried to copy these brokers from the US. And then we just ran into a problem because you cannot scale having like thousands of people, like calling truckers at truck stops and dealing with truckers. And I was like, what we are missing is something that connects the trucker with the brokers. It has to be a platform. So we built our own platform so that we could have our broker to scale. But then we realized that if you have to have a person involved in the transaction manually, and on the top of that, you need working capital on a per transaction basis, you're going to end up with a tiny gross profits, and you're not going to be able to scale to market domination. Like you need to, in order for you to solve the problem of 60% excess capacity in the market and a market that has a lot of fraud, you need to be like the online truck stop for everyone to transact and buy products and services. And that means you connect freight and truckers. Today we have 900,000 active truckers, which is like 80% of the trucks in Brazil moving freight inside the network. So you need to have the ability to be that place where everyone transacts, and then they do the anti-fraud to make sure that the trucker is a real trucker and the shipper is a real shipper. And then you need to have that place where if anyone needs financing, they can get financing, call it to renew the truck, to fix the truck, or for working capital in the case of the brokers that are going to get paid 90 days later.
So when you moved to Brazil, what do you think were some of the interesting challenges that you faced as an outsider, obviously besides not speaking the language?
So I think there are two things mainly that. One is that, and I found it because I didn't speak Portuguese, so I will use English, hire English lawyers and everything. But when it came to interview people, and again, this was 2013 when I moved here. So no one wanted to work for a startup. So you will get the leftovers, like the ones that didn't get accepted at Goldman or at consulting firms. Those are the guys that wanted to work for a startup. Being an entrepreneur was like, what do you do? I'm an entrepreneur. It's like, yeah, you're unemployed, basically. So you are the guy that, you cannot get a job. And then the guy comes for the interview. And the problem was that the candidates didn't speak English, the ones that wanted to work for a startup. That was a problem because I had to learn Portuguese quickly. But the real problem to me was that all these guys that will come to work with us in the interview, they will complain about Brazil a lot. And then I was like, and I'm going to repeat this, we were talking before the podcast, but there is a famous phrase from Jack Ma that when eBay was coming with tons of money to China, he called his team into one room and he said, look, don't worry about eBay, because eBay is a shark in the ocean and we are a crocodile in the Yangtze River. If we fight in the Yangtze River, we are going to win. If we fight in the ocean, we are going to lose. That means the bureaucracy and complexity of China is our best friends. And we need to learn how to navigate that complexity and bureaucracy. If we do that, the Americans that are typically the guys that are going to come with most of the money, they are not going to be able to compete with us. We are going to be like 10 steps ahead. And if the domestic market is large enough, our crocodile is going to grow into a monster that can go and fight in any ocean with anyone. And it happened with Alibaba. Brazil is little China, if you will. It's a massive domestic market. We grew to become large because our Chinese equivalent came to compete here with us. And the same story at lower level, but repeated, we won from them because they couldn't understand the Brazilian complexity and bureaucracy. So what I wanted here was people that is very optimistic, like yourself. Not many people I know are very optimistic about Brazil. So I wanted those people that are like, yeah, we are going to read the bureaucracy and complexity of Brazil, and we are going to use it to our advantage.
Nobody is more pessimistic about Brazil than Brazilians.
I don't know if it's changing or we are just meeting now a different type of Brazilians that are more like pro-business and optimistic. And they're like, my job is to transform Brazilian industries. So I have to do it and I cannot complain about it. So you start meeting different type of people. Maybe at the time, I was meeting people that were really the leftovers of the industry, the guys that couldn't get a job. No one would have I remember this guy that had a kid and was coming to work for me that I didn't have money. I was working at Starbucks, sleeping on a friend's couch. who is gonna do that? Like, you are gonna leave your job to work for like a company that most likely is gonna, and there's no historical records of successful companies in Brazil.
Yeah, there's no venture capital, right? At that
There is
point.
nothing.
Like it
At
was
that time
nothing.
was so. So I think it was part of the journey. Now it changes a lot because now you see success stories, and then people suddenly start thinking like, well, it's a way to get rich quick. Maybe it's a false impression, I think,
Yeah. I
but
mean,
they
it's
see the
2021. It's
success.
the impression circa 2021, right?
Yeah,
When there was like this pool of capital flowing
and now
in.
it's coming back. Now they are starting to realize that it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
But so a good team was very tough at the beginning. The other thing to me, but this is more specific to me, is that, and I learned, so Rodrigo Bayer, is an investor
Connected
that we
us.
know, yeah, connect us, and we know. So I met him through Angel List. And I arrived here, I drove my car. I didn't know the car needs a visa, by the way, Argentinian car. And it was 2013. Then I regretted in 2014 and the World Cup because they destroyed my car. But so being Argentinian and the problem with football is not really the benefits. And then with Rodrigo, we met on a Monday morning for breakfast, and then we went to the largest truck stop here in Sao Paulo and one of the largest in Brazil. And then Rodrigo pulled an iPad showing these guys they had the freight there at the truck stop, start showing the mock-up of what we were trying to do, and they got it. And they got really, really angry, and they start throwing stones at us, saying like, get out, get out. And then they start throwing stones at his wife's car. And then he was like, oh, my wife is gonna kill me. And then that was the first day. So I realized that it wasn't gonna be easy. And then a year in Brazil, the World Cup came. And now it's funny, but I was telling everyone I was from Spain and Uruguay. Depending on the day, I will have a different nationality. Then I learned it was better Uruguay because of the accent. And I remember I was on a taxi. So everything started because it was the World Cup, and a taxi driver asked me where I'm from. I said Argentina, and he said, I'm not gonna drive you. Get out. Because Argentinians were making a lot of problems there in Rio. They were laughing about Neymar hurting his back, and people was like,
So I don't want
they
to
were
go.
angry at Argentinians. And then I don't even like football. And then after that, I started telling everyone that I was from Uruguay until I found a guy that actually lived in Uruguay. And I've never been in the time, never visited Uruguay in my life. But at the beginning was tough. This is traditional industry. People like, they don't like change. And then it's like a guy that doesn't. So there is an investor, friends of Rodrigo, that rejected me so many times. And he was like, look, forget it. You are in one of the most complex countries in the world, trying to disrupt one of the most complex industries in one of the most complex countries in the world. You don't have any experience in logistics whatsoever. You never work in logistics. You don't speak Portuguese. And if you want to really like get it worse, you are Argentinian during the World Cup. So for those 5 reasons, just stop calling me. At that time, it was really tough because I had everything against us. So it took several years. Like we only start seeing some traction in 2016.
What do you think kept you going? Because like a lot of people would just give up and say, "Oh no, fuck it."
So I used to think not until long ago, even when we were like a $400 million company, I used to still had nightmares for some reason of me coming back to work at JP Morgan in London. I will see myself coming back with this fucking, how you call it, the car that you touch. That's why I don't use the car. I use my. I don't want to have that at the office. To me, the worst thing it could happen, it was going back.
How did they traumatize you so
Yeah.
much?
Yeah. And then I just didn't want to go back because I just didn't see the point of when I was there at JP Morgan, you will see these guys sitting there for 30 years. And it was like, I remember when I turned 30, I said, look, just said to the guy that was next to me, you start working here the day I was born, because it was my birthday. And like a week before, they were giving him like a watch as a present because he was 30 years at the same job doing the same thing. I didn't want to do that with my life, even if you were going to make more money. Yeah, I don't really know why, because it wasn't that much fun at the beginning here.
Yeah, I can imagine.
No money. You are always going bankrupt for like, out of 10 years, it was 7 years always going bankrupt, even when we were like a $400 million company. Because in order for you to build a massive marketplace, you need a lot of cash. You cannot charge anyone. It's this egg and chicken dilemma. So if you want to break the egg and chicken dilemma, you need massive amount of users coming in, and you cannot print any money. So you are not able to charge. So the company is always living out of investments. And you are always thinking like, in 18 months, I'm going to run out of money and maybe no one is going to invest and I'm done. And in Brazil, the Brazilian investors at the time, now it changed, they didn't have this mindset of like, profit today are secondaries to market domination tomorrow. So you are going to dominate the market and you are going to have massive gross profit, because once you dominate the markets, you have a great business model. And you see that with, Mercado Libre and other marketplaces. So for us, it was like a long period of time where we were always going bankrupt. It wasn't that much fun, but it was still better than going back to investment banking.
So how did you solve that chicken and the egg problem in the very beginning? Like, how did you create the network liquidity?
In 2016, we decided it was enough to be sitting at Starbucks here and then at the startup mansion, which is this co-work that the guys from Loft started. And I said, I need to go up to the truck stops. So I went back to this truck stop where they threw stones at me and Rodrigo, and I opened an office there. So we have pictures still of the office. We opened an office there, and we start saying to the guys that have freight, we said, look, we are your friend. I'm gonna list your freight in the platform. I'm gonna do it for you. And the amount of trucks that you're gonna find is much, much larger than the population of trucks at this truck stop. And then to the truck drivers, we said, look, don't be limited to this amount of freight. You can really go from Sao Paulo to Rio, and you can find the freight from your sofa rather than this nasty place, because it is what it was, really nasty. It's like full of homeless, that you feel like you are homeless when you're there. It's very outdated. It doesn't exist anymore. But anyway, I moved there. We rent an office. We pay the truck stop, so they let us open office there, so no one will stone us. And we start trading freights. We will manually input the freights, and then we will manually go and tell the trucker, like, give me your email. And the guy is like, yeah, it's like Tiago at Facebook. They didn't know what an email was. And that was a good thing, because we had a competitor that had a lot of money at the time. And they were like asking truckers for an email. And we were like, well, the trucker doesn't know what an email is, so we are going to ask for their phone number. But then WhatsApp didn't exist at the time here. And then they were using Nextel radios. So you can ask for the phone number or the Nextel ID. But then we realized these guys are changing the phones all the time, because when you do top up, it was cheaper not to keep your phone number. So they were like, every 2 weeks, they were changing their phone number. So long story short, we realized we need to have, they ask for the national ID number, the CPF that we call here in Brazil. And our competitor that raised like $30 million was still like with email. And then when he realized that no one had emails, they moved to phone numbers. And we were like 20 steps ahead, because we were there at the truck stop talking to truck drivers. So we start posting freight manually. We start signing up the truckers in a proper way. And then the trucker didn't have smartphones, but we realized that typically the family of the trucker was looking for freight for them on Facebook. So we open a Facebook group, and then we start posting all the freight on the Facebook group, and the family of the truck driver will go to Facebook. So we had a competitor with $30 million. I will go in on a taxi at the time. There was no Uber. And then I will listen to the advertising of my competitor in a taxi in the city of Sao Paulo, asking truck drivers to download an app on an iPad. Crazy. An iPad, like no one had smartphones, not even iPads.
Oh my God, that's like severe misunderstanding of the context.
Yeah, so, and we didn't even have a developer. I didn't need one, because it was a Facebook group. And that's how we started. And then once we had all these truckers commenting on Facebook, we opened a website, not a mobile app, a website, because the family of the truck driver was looking for freight on a PC. Only when WhatsApp launched in 2014 it was more end of 2016, 2017, that really the truckers start buying smartphones, and they start using WhatsApp, and they start using audio messages. So we had this idea that we are going to provide Wi-Fi to all the truckers for free at all the truck stops. And then with that, we enable the truckers to start downloading the app, and then we build an app. And it's when we saw for the first time the traffic going from website to app. And it was the first time that the tracker was ever connected to the internet on real time.
So the growth, the initial this growth happened as a result of the product, right? It was not performance marketing or paid marketing or anything. It was like tweaking the products and finding something that works for the drivers.
Yeah, when Valor Capital invested on us, I sat with Michael Nicholas and asking why. I asked the same question to Goldman later, but I said, why do you invest it? I wouldn't have invested because the risk was so high. And then he said something that I didn't realize. He said, we like entrepreneurs that are able to do so much with so little. And you beat your competitor that was invested by Mobley, which is the owner of iFood. And they are like really good at technology and execution. But we beat them with a Facebook group with no tech at the beginning. And then we put tech on it. But spending very little amount of money, we got a lot of stuff done. And that's what called their attention. We didn't have any revenue, but massive traction, massive amount of trackers coming to the platform, downloading the app, using it. And then, so Michael said, and this is a few years later, he said, I think if you were to raise a Series A, like nowadays, where the Series A's are like $10 million, we wouldn't have made it because we would have made the same mistake as our competitor. It's easier to stay in Sao Paulo in Itaim. You're not going to get killed. No one is going to stone you. You have air condition. So it's easier to be at an office at Itaim and then with $10 million, just put advertising and I hire a bunch of developers. And I asked them, when is the website done? But then I was going to ask for sign up via email and then via phone number. And until I realized that I'm building the wrong product, the money is gone. So going to the truck stop is what helped us that was the most important part of the entire history of the company, because it helped us out to break the egg and chicken dilemma and start growing very fast organically. Once you create the initial network effects, then you can go on holidays and the network keeps growing. And then it became more efficient for everyone. It was cheaper, it was faster to hire trackers, and it became safer because we start hiring the same tools that the neobanks, the digital banks are using to detect fraud. We start implementing that into tracking. So we start making sure that we were opening the door to good quality shippers and trackers. And then on the top of that, we start looking at the historical records of the trackers to make sure we were looking at what type of freight is the tracker moving, when is moving it, for whom is moving it, where is going and when. And with that, we build a historical record of the tracker. You got the user feedback that every marketplace has. And with that historical record, we start predicting the future, meaning we start predicting freight robbery. So all the freight insurance companies said, we want to have that information. So they plug into our network. And then the market became like exponentially better to what it was. And then it's when it started growing very fast. And then, so we went to like 900,000 active trackers in the network, which is like 80% of the market. But the shippers were still like, I take the trackers, I post freight in the platform, but I also have my WhatsApp group where I can hire the trackers that I hired in the past. So at some point we stopped growing. But we had all this information on the trackers and all the shippers and all the historical records. And we knew who was a good tracker and the bad tracker. And there is a correlation on if they default or not, because we can see if they default or not. And there is a thing called the no-show. I'm going to go tomorrow to 60 kilometers far away to pick up the freights, and then I don't show up because I found another freight. That's no-show. We measure it. So the guy that has a word that if I tell you I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there, and the guy is there and delivers the freight properly, that guy we discover is a good guy to lend money. And then the same happens with the shipper, because we know if the shipper is paying on time, if they treat the tracker well. So based on that and the credit score, of course, we open a bank. More than 500,000 trackers now open bank accounts with us. So we are trading more than $20 billion in transactions going from the shippers to the trackers. That's the payments. And then on the top of that, we build fast payment for the trackers. So the tracker can, rather than getting paid a week after you deliver the freight, we say, do you want fast payments? So when you get the freight, you get paid. And then we say to the shippers, look, you can hire trucks and then you pay me at the end of the month. So we call it post-payment shipments, which is credit, working capital we provide. We did a partnership with BTG, and then we were like, all these things make you scale exponentially. You are like trading, like moving so much freight, and you're still growing 100%. And we don't have a marketing team. Our marketing is a few analysts that are really good. Not long ago, we didn't have a sales team. It was mostly engineering and products. And So most of the focus was on breaking the egg and chicken dilemma, and that was with products.
And unlocking the growth through product.
Yeah, and it was the CEO and the CPO and the CTO sitting at the truck stops. And then when we talk about things that are difficult, I mean, I was an investment banker making good money before I came here. So that ego that you have has to go away. And then you need to go into the battlefield. You need to be in the front line. You cannot be like, at the office commanding everyone. And that's something that we kept forever. So we are still the same way. So I'm always trying to. So today I'm going to go back home at 12 o'clock at night. We have an event, and I'm going to be there in the front line talking to the most pissed off clients that we have. But those are the ones that teach you the most because they are pissed off. So they are going to say everything they think. They're not going to be very polite. And that's where you learn. And this is how you get the gray hair too. But that's how you save a lot of errors and mistakes.
So one of my favorite piece of content is Paul Graham's article on Do Things That Don't Scale. And I don't know if you read that, but I think when you look at that, even like if you take the US market, you look at these things that made like Uber successful, for example, or Airbnb successful. This like highly manual things that founders did that led to this like growth unlock and then another growth. It's very similar to what you're saying. But I'm curious, as this like the company grows, the number of people that work in the company grows, right? The cash positions of the company improve. But how do you maintain this lean and agile mindset and just like desire to wrap up your sleeves and go to the battlefields and listen to, like you said, this like negative feedback and ton of shit flowing at you from unhappy customers? How do you maintain that or cultivate that in yourself?
I'm going to say what everyone says, but I'm going to go one level lower.
Okay.
You want to have a very strong culture. That means leading with example. So I went to Mexico. We are expanding to Mexico. So I went to Mexico with my chief of staff. And then we hired some guys from logistics that were doing consulting. And the guys were like wasting time. I got really like, and I don't want to have any patience. I don't want to be nice to people that make
You have
me
no
waste
patience
time.
for
No
wasting
patience.
time.
So we said, half an hour into the meeting, we fired the guys, all of them. And then on the way from the airport, my chief of staff was asking the taxi driver, where can we find truckers? And they said, on Mercado Abasto, I think it was called. And then when we arrived, the first thing we said is like, we want to go to Mercado Abasto. No, there you're going to get kidnapped. You cannot go. There is no trucks. But the taxi driver told me there are trucks, and I look at on Google Earth, and I can see the trucks there. I want to go. No, you're going to get kidnapped. It's drug dealing. We didn't believe them, but it was true apparently. And then these guys that we were looking for, that are the shippers, the brokers, are called coyotes in Mexico. It's a slang for brokers, but coyotes is also slang for people that cross the border, right? And they move people and sometimes truck. And then we took a taxi, we fired the consultants. We went there, the two of us. And then, so this is about the culture, right? And I was like, I don't know if I want to go. And my chief of staff wanted to go. And I was, I cannot be like,
I can't ditch
I'm not going to show weakness. So let's get kidnapped together. So we went there, and the guy gets off the car, and he was like, where can I find coyotes? And these guys there at the Abasto, at the market, it's a market, massive market. They're like, what? And I'm like, no. We are looking for the trucks. And so long story short, we end up taking pictures with the truckers. I have pictures with the trucker. I exchanged numbers with a lot of truckers, with the son of the trucker. I kept talking to them. We even became like friends, to the point that when I go to Mexico, I'm going to call the guy when he's in DF to go for lunch. So we are expanding to Mexico like the first day. We are going to the dangerous place. We are taking the risk. And we are talking to truckers. I'm understanding firsthand, and I don't want an intermediary there. So that culture is seen by the rest of the organization, and then they replicate it, because if the CEO is doing that, you better do that, otherwise you're going to fit. And the second thing, I prefer a crazy guy that I have to stop than this lazy guy that you have to push. That's the culture. So I prefer to have the crazy guys. If there is a wall, they're going to break it. And that's the people you want. And to get that people, I interview every single person at the company today.
Still?
Still.
How many people
And I
work in
don't
the
care
company?
if I have 750,
Uh-huh.
but the culture has to be the same. I want to know what they do in their personal life, and I want to know all this stuff. Maybe you can say, well, there is no equity, there is no diversity, there is nothing like that. That's true because it's a very solid culture. If I'm not going to become friend with the guy or like to have a drink with that guy, with that person, then like we don't share the same values and the same way, I prefer not to hire the person. Maybe sometimes we leave some good people out that they are very talented, but I want talented and motivated people, but I also want the crazy ones.
How do you test for craziness? How do you understand if it's going to be a fit?
No.
What's your process?
So how we identify those guys, there are a set of questions that you can ask.
What questions do you ask? What are your favorites?
My favorites are, what do you like most about, what are the three things that you would like to find here at this company the most, like culturally? Which are the three things that you dislike about the company? If I ask your friend what they don't like about you, what
would
could they say? And then I ask, what do they do when they are not working? Which sport they like, if any? And then I try to cross the answers to see if they match. I ask them things that they have done that they are proud of, and then I start like digging into that. But it's not one, there is no silver bullets here. Like I think you need to ask for a set of questions and then you need to cross the answers to see the guy. Because most of the people is like, for example, I look at the CV first. If the guy never spent more than 2 years at the job, there are people that are 40 years old and never spend more than 2 years doing the same thing. I don't interview that. That is quick. I don't interview, no interview. But then there are these people that, you know, always leave. I want to understand why they left the job, especially if it's a good company, because, oh, it was a layoff. But very rarely at the layoff, you let go very good people. You're not going to say it was because of performance, but, you know, for very good people,
you will find
I'll
the
give my
application.
salary, or, you know, I'm going to sell my, like,
Soul
yeah, I'm going to do something, but I'm not going to let good people go.
Yeah.
So you want to understand, like, in a deep level of detail, those transitions, and then you want to cross with, you know, your three things that you like the most, you dislike, what you do in your personal level, what are people going to say nice and bad about you. Another thing that I ask is, on your last review, what could your manager say about you? You know, this person, these one-on-one reviews. And then I ask if they agree or not. And then I try to cross all these things to see if it match. We are back 5 times per week at the office. That's a good filter already. Another thing, my C-levels, most of them, they were not hired as C-levels. They come from junior positions. So they grew within the company.
You know, my favorite question, I had this amazing conversation with Paulo Passoni on the pod when he said, if the founder, like, he thought that one of the biggest lies in the industry is that the fact that founders should stay with the company almost forever. He said, like, you know what, when you look at your schedule and you understand that you don't put like 100 hours a week into building the company, that's time to find someone who will. And that prompted me to think, as an investor, actually, one of my favorite questions now when I speak to the founders is, how many hours a week do you work? And you can learn so much from that. And if you cross-reference that with the hobbies and whatever, it just like gives a very strong clarity in terms of the level of commitment that they have.
I like that question you ask, but no entrepreneur is ever going to tell you that they work little. But then you can detect.
But now they will say, I work like 60 hours.
Yeah.
It's about 60 hours.
But then you ask, like, you know, when we were coming here, you said, look, I work out like 6 o'clock in the morning. Then it's when you pick out, this person is like, who likes to wake up at 5:30 in the morning or 5 o'clock to go and do like intense cardio, lifting weights? No one likes it. I mean, sometimes you do, but most of the time I prefer to be in bed. So those little things that you start picking up, it's like if a person wakes up at 5 o'clock in the morning to work out, it's not going to be soft. Agree. It's one of the things that this person understood, that success is built on consistent efforts. And it's going to wake up every single day and it's going to work out for 2 hours. And it's going to keep doing that probably for the rest of their life, because they understand that you're only going to get fit once you do this like consistently. And once you understand that, then you also apply that
to business.
to business. And then you say, how can you stay 10 years doing the same and being like, not making money? And it's consistent efforts over years and years of consistent efforts that eventually is going to build success.
I love what you said, that you need to commit to be successful. And it's interesting that the podcasting, for example, is one of those domains where it's all about compounding. Like you got to keep going. And like 80%, 90% of podcasters give up after like third or fourth episodes because they don't see this spike, this like adrenaline shot, like exponential growth, because it's all about compounding, changing listeners' behavior and so on and so forth. And when I was little, I did ice skating. So to me, it was all about like, you don't evaluate your performance on ice on a day by day because it varies. One day you are like totally crushing it, and the second day it's as if you've never ice skated in your life. So you don't look at this like singular events. You just know that if you do enough, if you put enough hours into that on a consistent basis, the score will take care for itself. And I think that experience helped me with the podcast and with investing as well, because especially in Latin America, everything is a long-term game. There's no, I mean, there was this 2021 bonanza, but it's not how people make money here. Like it's consistency. Like you started 2011, right? Most of the amazing companies that enjoy the growth and success today, you look at Quintandar, for example, you look at Cirque that I already brought. You look at Madeira. You look at all of these companies. They were started like a decade ago, and they now start seeing these fruits of labor of the overnight success. Right? I'm curious. When we were talking about this product-led growth, a lot of that came as a result of tech advancements, right? To a certain extent, like the WhatsApp, like the Wi-Fi availability, the penetration of cheap smartphones, right? The drivers started using from that transition. What is the percentage of success of Frete would you assign to luck and timing as opposed to just grinding that out and executing?
It's a tough question because as long as you are still alive and you have this determination to keep going and you understand that you are going to be successful, but it's going to take time, luck is going to come. So I started doing this in 2010. In 2011, I ran out of money already, all my money. I sold the only flat I had, and then that is all the money I made, and I was more than 30 years already old. And then it took us until almost 2016 that we really start, getting money, getting investors. So it was like 7 years, 6 years of suffering. But eventually the luck came. Somehow these guys from Valor invested, Scott Sobel and Michael Niklas. They are like, those are the guys that I think they are like massive luck, because I could have found another investor, but I found investor that not only gave us money, but it's the only investor that really added value beyond money at the time. And then through this guy, I met the guy, one of the founders of Uber, that helped me a lot, and we became good friends. And then I met Goldman Sachs, and we will go with the Scots and pitch together to Goldman. And then we did the same with Blackstone, was his connection. And we start convincing these guys that Goldman was not even investing in LatAm in technology at the time. There was no investments from Goldman. It was the most unlikely investor. I don't know if you can say 50% luck or not. I think it goes together. Like, luck is when preparation and opportunity cross.
Yeah, preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah, but you have to be ready, and then you have to keep going. To me, it took like, if you call luck, when we met Valor, it took us several years. But after Valor, we almost crashed and burned several times. So I think we were very lucky. But what I don't want is people to think, oh, well, then, so if I'm lucky, it's going to be fun. And if I'm not, it's not. So if you're not lucky, you're going to have to die trying. If you're willing to do that in whatever you're doing, then eventually you're going to succeed one way or the other.
Yeah.
But some people don't make it. Some people die before.
I love that we started touching on this near-death experiences. And I know there was a number, but there was a pivot in the beginning, relatively of Frete, when you had to shut down basically the company in Argentina and like open it in Brazil. So Tell me a little bit about that experience and any other important near-death experiences that you think leveled up you as a founder, as an operator, as a leader of Frete.
When we were in Argentina, we didn't have any traction. We had to move to Brazil. I had no money whatsoever. There was no company. It wasn't a real company. It was my name, my bank account, and then an accountant with his hands in his head saying, "What do you do?" Because the little amount of revenue we were getting, it was all mixed up. My personal account and the company was the same at the time. I don't recommend anyone to do that. It's better to open a company. But then, you want to open a company that can be invested by investors. You want to open in the US. So I went to talk to this guy, and that was a lawyer, a Canadian lawyer living in Argentina, writing a book on why everyone hates Argentinians, something like that.
This is so random.
Yeah, and his company is Tango Law. Or it was, I don't know. And then it's very random. And then he did a movie about favelas. He's great. And then I went to see him, and when I get introduced, the guy goes like, my hourly charge, it was like very high, something I couldn't pay. So I said, look, I cannot pay your hourly charge, so I'm not gonna go. And he was like, come anyway. We met at a coffee place, and then he started asking me, interviewing me, what do I do, what my parents do, why I left JP Morgan, and blah, blah, blah. And then he goes like, so no money whatsoever. I was telling him I'm moving to Brazil, and I was gonna start raising money there. And then after the coffee, he goes, look, I can invest, and I think I can bring my close friend to invest too. That is like his brother. So this was Douglas, and his friend is Simon. I can convince him to invest, but I want you to, like, if you were at JP Morgan, for sure your boss had money. So I went back to London, first I started calling London, and until eventually went there, and I was like, look, it's the last money I have. I should come in here begging you to invest, because if you don't invest,
These guys
it was kind of like that. It wasn't begging, but I went asking to this guy called Dimitris. He was at Citi already. So I talked to him. He's not an angel investor. He never angel invested in any company. So he said, okay, I'm going to invest. I'm going to convince my other good friends. And that's how we got the initial money started. Then NXTP Labs, it is an accelerator from Argentina, also invested. So that near-death experience, because we had no money whatsoever, then it got us a little bit of money.
Like a lifeline.
But the money went all away quickly. And I wouldn't recommend anyone to have this, because I felt like with this guy at JP Morgan, that I became friends over the years when I was at JP Morgan. And he convinced his good friend that wasn't experienced on angel investing either. So they did it more like a favor. And then I felt a lot of pressure for a long time that I was going to lose their money. And at some point, I managed to, in one of the rounds, they took some money out, not everything, but at least they got what they invested. And that was a massive relief. Because if it's a professional investor, they understand the statistics. I do 100 companies, and then I'm going to lose here, I'm going to make it here. But when it's your friend that they don't know what angel investing is, and they give you like, $20,000, and they are like, I'm going to lose the money, I'm going to let them down, they are going to hate me forever. You get a lot of pressure. So there I got the money, then moved to Brazil, then the money was gone again. It was like $200,000. That was the initial investment. Then we ran out of money in Brazil, and we stayed without money for like more than a year. It was the worst time for me, but the best time for the company, because it was me learning the markets. And because I don't come from logistics, I had to learn like reading a new book rather than assuming the trucker has a phone number and the trucker does this and that. I had to sit and talk to the trucker and learn how trucking works. So you cannot have any ego. First, because you don't have any money, so you are like a loser. Everyone is like your own age, more than 30 years old, like drinking beer and going to nice clubs and driving nice cars, and you're like fucking loser walking on the streets, going to Starbucks. And then you know nothing of what you are doing, so you have to study and you have to learn quickly to see if you have an opportunity here or not. So that second near-death experience, which was coming here to Brazil, was tough, but was necessary, because now I understand the very details of the business. But that was the toughest time, was between 2013, when I ran out of money here in Brazil, May 2013, And I don't know, 2016 roughly, it was tough, which is when we started raising money quickly. And then Goldman Sachs came in with $10 million.
What did you learn about partnerships on the investment side specifically?
You know, Warren Buffett's partner says, the most important contract you are going to sign in your life is marriage. So keep your eyes wide open before you sign the contract and close it after you get married. So with investors, it's the same. Investors are not perfect, but they have the money. They help you when you need them the most. Sometimes they are going to have uninformed opinions. Some of them sometimes are going to have a certain level of arrogance because they made it in their field. And you will need to discuss with them, and then you will need to tell them they are wrong, or like, you know, because they are smart people. Mostly investors are very smart people, right? That's how they got there. But they don't have the experience, and sometimes they never run a company. They don't have experience in the field, and sometimes they never run a company. What I learned is that you need to close your eyes and understand that not everyone is perfect. The founder of Shimpas, Cesar, says sometimes you have to eat the frog. He called it. A few frogs you will have to eat. They are not gonna be tasty, but just keep going, right? Just don't fight. Keep going.
Just eat the frog.
And at the end of the day, if the company goes well, everyone is gonna be happy. So what I will say is that try to negotiate everything you can negotiate before you sign the contract. Some things you are gonna need to let go before you sign. And after you sign the contract, try to make the best out of the relationship. But that doesn't mean that you have to be a yes guy. It's like marriage. Sometimes you have to be strong and you have to make your points. A little bit of fight sometimes, but not falling out completely. Don't split out. In my case, I was lucky with the partners we have, but we don't agree 100% of the time. But I'm lucky that I win 100% of the time because I think they respect that we are there on the battlefield fighting.
What did you learn from Uber?
One of the co-founders of Uber is in my board of directors since 2016. We became very good friends and he helped me a lot. And what I learned is about culture and courage. You have to be fearless, you have to be outspoken, and you have to be low profile. So I do very little amount of podcasts. I'm not a very public person. Our culture is not like that for some reason. We are more like hands down and executing. But then no one knows what's going on. So you have the pros and cons. But what I learned from these guys is a little bit that. It's like hands down, execution, fearless. And we try to do that in a way, in our culture.
What did you learn about risk management and using technology to manage risk?
I learned two things. That the risk is about the statistics. Statistics means if I have a tracker that is always looking for coffee from Sao Paulo to Curitiba and tomorrow is looking for drinks to Rio de Janeiro or Carnival, for example, it's most likely someone say to this tracker, look, well, get a load of beers and I'm going to buy it for 10,000 reais or something like that. So you can predict that with statistics. The past predicts the future. And if there is a massive change in behavior in one of the players, it's a red flag. So with statistics, you can prevent most of the fraud. That's the first thing I learned. The other thing I learned is that relationships are important in these markets. Like in most traditional industries, if you are going to disrupt them, and you have to be very careful and very smart how you do it. So one of the first things that I did when I arrived to Brazil, I got a guy that was vice president of the Association of Carriers, traditional family with massive career that knows everyone. He's into he knows the politics of the markets. Everyone respects this guy. No one steals his freights. So I said to this guy, you want to be an advisor? And I thought, if this guy comes in and he becomes a partner and makes money and he's going to help me out to have a better relationship with the offline industry, because when you are changing the industry, you have unions.
Yeah.
And these unions, most of the time, they want money and they don't want to let you operate. So you want someone that is strong and is respected to say, look, this guy is part of the industry now. So you have to be very smart how you approach the industry. You cannot be very with a very big ego saying like, I'm coming here to change how this operated for the last 100 years, and you're all pussies, and I'm gonna tell you how to do it, then you're gonna have a hard time.
And what about like on the maybe more like technological level? Like, what did you learn about using technology to manage all these different types of risk and risk profiles?
Well, we learned that with AI, you can predict fraud in a much better way than we were able to predict frauds 5 years ago. And you are here with an industry that the anti-fraud tools that they are using is calling someone and asking if they used this tracker before, and looking if this tracker paid the energy bill, because if the guy didn't pay the energy bill, maybe it's likely to steal because doesn't have any money. And they are using very old school methods to prevent fraud on a multi-billion dollar, multi-billion reais industry, because each load is very valuable. So I think looking forward 5 to 10 years, I think the largest disruption in this industry is going to be fraud and anti-fraud with AI. You can now replicate a video, right? Like the shipper wants to do a video call with a tracker to make sure it's a real tracker. You can now replicate that with AI. Send me a video. I can make a video and send it to you. Today it's almost perfect. It's going to be perfect in a year. I can replicate the voice. So the tools that had been used for the last 3 years are obsolete now. I think the people that are committing fraud in this industry is more advanced than the people that are working on the anti-frauds, because the people that we have working on anti-frauds in this industry, they are like more old school. So when I look at a guy working on anti-fraud for tracking, I want to see a technology / AI guy. I don't want to see an ex-army guy, an ex-policeman, because these guys, first, their head is wired on how the market used to work. It's very difficult for you to learn very quickly because you assume a lot of stuff are like that because it have always been like that, but it's changing quickly. So you want a very smart engineer trying to learn how the fraud works and how it's changing, and then being able to build tools that are gonna create the anti-frauds. So I think it's gonna be a tech from both sides. Fraud and anti-fraud is gonna become pure technology, like in most industries today. Everything is moving online. It's not the police guy that is gonna prevent fraud. It's not the ex-army guy.
Are there any other like measurable impact of AI on your business or in the industry that you see that will be like huge shifts or like huge tailwinds for the industry going forward?
What we are seeing is fraud and also how we match freight with trucks. We can do that in a much better way. And also to predict the pricing of the tracker, because the pricing of the tracker changes on a daily basis several times per day. So if it starts raining today, the price is going to increase. If you're in the Mato Grosso area where you have dirt roads. If in Carnival, or on a Friday afternoon, if there is an accident in a road going to Rio, the price is going to increase because it's going to take longer. So demand and offer is what drives the price of a truck. And the way that today the truck is priced is calling other companies asking how much are you paying for. It's like the currency market in the old days. It's like the trading floor in the old days. So we built like a Bloomberg terminal where you have the on real time how much companies are paying for trucking capacity. But today we are not able to predict forward. Like the prediction is very limited. I think as the technology evolves, we are going to have models that are going to be able to predict with more certainty how much is going to be the price of a trucking contract, like a few months ahead.
And you think it's going to happen like in the next, like what
It's
period?
happening now.
It's already happening.
Insurance companies are plugging into our network. We are investing like tons of money on AI because there is a lot of automation. Like trucking companies today are talking on the phone with truckers, so they employ a lot of people, so their margins are tiny. These people that are talking to truckers, now they move to an internal chat. They are talking on a chat in our platform. And now that chat, we discovered that 80% of the conversations in that chat are always the same. Hey, is a freight still available? Do you have freight to another location? Can I use this type of truck rather than the one you stated? So 80% of the conversation is repeated. So that is automated with the bots very quickly. And eventually the brokers that negotiate with the truckers are going to do that on an automated basis. Once the automation happens, more data is going to be captured. With that data, you can predict the trucking contract. The entire negotiation of the trucker, how it was 10 years ago, the trucker will go to a truck stop, look at the window, that was a piece of paper saying I pay 5,000 reais for 30 tons of coffee going from Sao Paulo to Rio. So the guy goes there, tries to negotiate over the counter, right? That's how it used to happen. And then they negotiate for, I don't know, they're going to pay 5,000 reais. So no one has that data, only the trucker and the owner of the freights. And then the guy behind this window is going to say to the trucker, look, tomorrow you're going to do 60 kilometers to go pick up these freights. The guy goes tomorrow, does 60 kilometers to go pick up the freight, and the freight is already gone. So the trucker lost an entire day and money to go there. Or the freight is there, but rather than loading 10 o'clock in the morning, you're going to load at night. And then if you're lucky to load at night and then you go and move the freight, maybe you arrive and the facilities where you have to deliver the freight are closed. There is no one there and you have to wait for 5 hours. So all these inefficiencies are offline and we move them online. And now this data processing that we are implementing and technology is getting cheaper and cheaper. And we are seeing that because the negotiations are done through chats, semi-automated today. All that information helps you to bring a lot of efficiency and drop the value of moving freight, because now there is less freight robbery, but also I know that this guy that always asks truckers to load at 10 o'clock typically makes them wait for 10 hours, or the no-show, meaning the trucker arrives and the freight is not there for this specific company is very high, or for this specific trucker that has to go there and doesn't show up, it's very high. So then you can start putting the right price for the freight for the right players, because moving freight with trucker number A is not the same price as number B, because one of them 50% of the time shows up. And if the guy doesn't show up, it creates a lot of cost for the company because they need to go and find another truck. So all these variables and complexities, once you move them online, with data analysis, it becomes very simplistic with a score.
It also probably unlocks the new revenue opportunities. I'm just wondering, when you started the company, how big did you think the revenue opportunity for you is, and how big do you think it is today?
No, at the time I had no idea.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have an idea of what I was doing. I just wanted to build the company and solve this problem for the truckers. Today, I think it's unlimited. It's massive because,
Like, put
again,
some number on it. I'm just curious about
hundreds of billions. Because it's not
in
only
revenue.
Brazil.
We're not talking about like TAM, or are we
No,
talking
in
about
revenue.
in
Because you are talking about software. And software, one thing I learned over the years is that software expands exponentially. Credit is one example. Like a year ago, we didn't have credit. Now we are like one of the largest financiers for truckers, for the trucking market in Brazil, and it's growing very fast. And this happens exponentially because of the marketplace, of the vertical integration with connecting freight with loads. But then I also learned that you can actually do expand to other markets. And then we also learned that if I wanted to open, for example, at some point we did, and then we shut it down because we wanted to focus. But at some point I said, I want to be the largest reseller of gas for Brazil. So one guy got us a network of 250 truck stops that covered the entire of Brazil. And we were selling gas on a debit card, on plastic. The problem is that we wanted to focus and we wanted to stay profitable. So we said we need to, I wanted to be laser focused on the largest opportunity, which is anti-fraud and fintech, in my view. But I can go back and we can be the largest reseller of gas. We can be the largest resellers of insurance for freights and insurance for the truck. And we can be the largest reseller of anything that the truck needs to move, or any, call it products or services like insurance. And then we can be the largest bank for the trucking market in Brazil. And then as a consequence of Brazil, you are going to be in Argentina. But then when I go to Mexico, I see the same problems as Brazil. So, and it doesn't take the same amount of time to break the chicken and egg dilemma in Mexico, because the market evolved so much that it's a totally different market today. And you can leverage the technology and the know-how you have to start over very quickly.
Would U.S. market be dramatically different from the markets in Latin America in your perspective?
The markets in the US has a different story. There was a company called Valor. It was a trading floor for truckers. So rather than having offices at truck stops, you will call this guy, Valor Truck, get me a truck, and he will do it for you. This is because of, historically in the US, there was more money. The entrepreneurial culture in the US is much, much stronger, or whichever reason, but you have this company starting and then you have the other companies that says a large company like Unilever cannot work directly with truck owner operators because they have a peak of demand at the end of the month. And if they hire tons of people to talk to truckers at the end of the month, what are these guys going to do at the beginning of the month? Nothing, because there is no demand. So every single type of industry has their own fluctuations, like massive amount of freight at the end of the month or at the beginning of the month. So these guys in the US created the freight brokers, and they became massive in the 80s. So Unilever will give the freight to the freight brokers that will call dial a truck, and the dial a truck guys will hire the truckers. So everything moved from truck stops to kind of like not online, but a better process. And then when the internet came along, dial a truck became dat.com, massive company. So dat.com is not our exact equivalent, but they do like maybe 25% of what we do now, because of the market is different. And the brokers that were offering services to Unilever, for example, became like $10, $15 billion businesses. C.H. Robinson is public company, is well known, is one of them. So you got less fragmentation in the US because the brokers became very large. And you got DAT that works with these massive brokers to find carriers, but the carriers are also less fragmented. The carrier is the truck owner operator because there is more information flows, it's more transparent. So the trucker can go to the bank with low interest rate and buy 3 trucks and becomes a company. So the fragmentation starts fading away because you got one large company that is Unilever is going to hire another large broker that is called C.H. Robinson that is going to hire a fleet owner operator, not a truck owner operator that owns like 40 trucks. So the space for marketplace becomes weaker. The marketplace, like the fuel for marketplace is fragmentation. So what you want is massive domestic economies because you want to build this monster very quickly and then fight in the ocean like Jack Ma used to say. You want to have a massive playground, ideally very complex, because then you can build this with little amount of competition because you need network effect. You need to be the winner takes most. And that network effect is very strong. The higher the fragmentation from both sides of the network, the stronger the network gets, right? Mm-hmm. Mercado Libre, Alibaba, you got several examples. We found that the market that was like that is China because of similar story. Nothing happens, everything is offline, everything is outdated, and suddenly I don't know if I call it the internet revolution or the VC revolution, because it's both. But suddenly VCs are willing to fund these crazy companies that are going to they're going to print no revenue for 10 years in order to create a network that is going to digitalize entire markets with the hope that they are going to make some money in the future. That you need hardcore venture capitalists to do that. That's why you need to marry the venture capitalists. You need them. It's not an option. Like, I'm going to bootstrap. Okay, good luck. But you're not going to build like a true network effect business. So that's why we cannot find the same business in the US. Less amount of fragmentation. There is already a large network there. But in my view, the network effects of that network is a little bit weaker compared to the Chinese equivalent or to the Brazilian equivalent.
I also think that you cannot just put the fintech on top of anything in the US. Like, you don't have the luxury of unlocking this additional type of growth, right? That, for example, we're talking about Mercado Libre, but a big growth comes from Mercado Pago, right now. So I don't think that luxury exists in the US anymore.
I agree. There is too much competition. So, for example, let's talk about our marketplace, how it will be in the US. I build a marketplace. I want to sell gas. There are like 1,000 companies selling gas, already doing a good job. Maybe I can leverage the marketplace, but I'm going to spend a lot of time and money, efforts fighting with competitors. And then I want to do fintech again. Several good quality fintechs with tons of money. Even if you have the marketplace and you can win, if these guys have money, they are going to hurt you because you are going to destroy value. You're going to burn away your money. And then you build the marketplace and then you want to verticalize. It's tough because in every single layer, when you go down the marketplace, call it anti-frauds, gas, fintech, when you go through these different layers, in every single different layers, you're going to find very good quality competitors, very well funded. In Brazil, it's like, okay, I build a network. Now there is a lot of fraud and I'm being accused of every single fraud in the market is my fault because we digitalize the market. So once you build a network effect, you have to run very quickly to stop the frauds. And there is no plug and play. At the beginning, you have to build it. Now we are starting to see some plug and plays but those plug and plays, they are plug and plays for a larger tool, which is anti-fraud for tracking, which is very specific. So you cannot plug it into your network and the fraud stops. You're gonna build anti-fraud engine and you're gonna use several tools that are gonna be very costly. And then you say, well, now that I build the anti-fraud and then I have data, I'm gonna finance these guys that don't have any financing. And then you realize that you need to go and build everything from scratch. You need to build the infrastructure. You need to build you want to do credit, you need to build the credit engine from scratch. There is no partnerships that can be done. Because who is the best one at lending money to truck owner operators in Brazil? There's no one. And then you look at Mexico, it's even worse than Brazil. And you look at Argentina, and it's the same. And then you look at the US and you start counting the companies, and an hour later, you're still counting. And all companies with great teams, very well funded. And then it takes years until they kill each other and build like a
I love
winner.
this like blue ocean slash red ocean kind of parallel. How do you think about the product strategy? Is it like a short feedback loop with the customers?
Yeah, it's feedback loop. But obviously, you want to understand where the business is going and you want to prioritize. So the way we focus is like this. We say whatever we do has to have the ability to create massive scale to become the absolute leader in the markets. And then if this product is going to monetize, has to be massive gross profits and at least $100 million in revenue potential. Why we do that? Because we are a massive scale company. So today it's like 80% of the truckers hunting for freight inside the platform. Massive part of the market is transacting inside our platform today. I don't want to waste time and focus because we had this business before. It was like tiny gross profits, a lot of problems all the time. And I'm spending 90% of my stress. I'm not sleeping at night because of this thing when I should be focusing on this thing. Then you want to grow fast in the short term. You buy companies, then you need to integrate these companies. And 1 or 2 years later, you realize that you're spending most of your time trying to integrate these cultures and systems and all this shit you bought. And then you're not really focused on building value for clients. You became a private equity play. And in my view, that destroys value because if you're focusing on integrating cultures and systems in a market that evolves very quickly and you're not building new products, then you stop innovating. And I prefer to be the opposite. I prefer to be like a lean business with extreme focus on doing 1 or 2 things. So the way we run the business is pretty much like in 3 hours per day, I can have an overview of the entire business with all the teams because we don't have that many products. So it's very easy for us to have visibility on what's going on. But then again, each of these products where we are spending time can scale to become like a 100 billion business on its own if well executed.
Before we move to the rapid fire, if you were to deconstruct just one most important leadership lesson that you learned out of that experience of going through cycles, building this business, rolling up your sleeves, if you were to deconstruct just one, what do you think is the most important lesson that you learned?
Hiring and spending time trying to find the right people is the most important thing, but you need to combine that with very low ego. Because if you have a high ego and you don't listen to people and you are difficult to work with, good people are going to go away. So if I could go back in time, I will have trained myself better to hire good people earlier on. And then I will train myself better to understand how to work with these guys.
On that note, we're going to move to the rapid fire. I'm going to ask you 5 short questions, and I'll appreciate your immediate responses to that. So let's dive right in. The first question is, what's the most underrated or under the radar tech company in Latin America?
I think it's Mercado Libre, even though it's $100 billion business. I'm convinced it's the only company I invested actually.
Really?
A lot of my money there. I'm inspired by Mercado Libre, by their execution capabilities. So I'm convinced that if tomorrow e-commerce becomes illegal, within a few years, these guys will be again at $100 billion business
Doing something else.
selling ice cream maybe, but they are gonna be there. I think the potential of Mercado Libre is still underlooked.
What is the question you wish people asked you more often?
I would like that everyone that works, at least with me, understands that success doesn't come overnight, and when it comes, it's not the rule, it's the exception. So whatever you want, you're gonna have to work for a consistent period of time. And it's gonna be suffering. And I think human beings are designed to suffer. That's why we wake up, like you do the same. But we wake up at 5 o'clock and then we go to the gym, and I suffer a lot. But it's 2 hours that you have to suffer, because that's how you build success.
Fair enough. If you had to build another startup today, but not in logistics space, what industry would you pick and why?
I will do it in medicine, biology, in medicine.
Why?
I think everything related to biology is gonna suffer massive disruption over the coming years.
Partially because of AI, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree, and you already see the impact in those spaces, like at least in the US, on the drug discovery. It's insane how much faster everything becomes. I think the whole longevity thing will be completely redefined as a result. What's one counterintuitive lesson you've learned about scaling a marketplace business that most founders do not realize?
That one is easy. For some reason, everyone talks about network effects, everyone describes network effects, but everyone underestimates network effects. And you can see companies trying to compete with established network effect businesses. Magalu tried to compete with Mercado Libre. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And you see the results. And then I see it myself with our business. And we face strong competition from very experienced founders, which is the guys from Full Truck Alliance in China. They came to compete with us, and we competed for a few years. And they didn't even make a dent to our network. And if I give you all the KPIs of the platform, you will never know that at some point we face massive competition from a company that is established and very successful in China.
Last one. What's more important, passion or perseverance?
Perseverance.
Why?
Like 100,000 times more.
Why is
Well,
that?
because I don't know if you need to have passion to persevere. I think you have to have passion to persevere in a way. Otherwise, it's going to be tough. But if you don't persevere, luck is not going to show up to your doorstep.
If you don't grind it out.
Yeah.
Listen, I knew that it's going to be a very wide range, thought-provoking conversation, but I didn't expect that the business is so complex, and your story is absolutely crazy. So I'm super excited to see what's next, and have a great admiration and respect for what you've built. Thank you so much for joining me and sparing your time. I know that it's extremely valuable, and now that I know that you don't waste it, I feel extremely flattered to have you on the pod.